Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant, heading out on a few rescue missions. There's a number of things out there that need doing, so I decided to swap out my Asp for my Vulture in order to get them done. The aim then is to drop in at all the distress calls and see what is going on. There's a number of things that can be done in them now, including a short scenario of multi-wave combat, which is where I come across this guy. I'll be talking more about that toward the end of the video. In the meantime, there was a whole load of other things I actually come across. I did stop in a few unidentified signal sources as well as some shipwrecks, and I've got to admit I come across quite a few different interesting things. Here then was the first distress call of the session, and it was to be one of the more common ones. Not too much going on here, a lone guy sitting in his ship that has run out of fuel. Most of you have probably come across one of these, but like a complete idiot, I hadn't remembered to pack any fuel limpet drones, so I was unable to help this guy. Not a good start. So I simply left him alone in space, crying out for help. Anyway, it was time to move on to the next distress call. Sometimes when you jump into these places, you're immediately surrounded by pirates, and it's just random luck what ships you actually get attacking you. Sometimes it can be a wing of Sidewinders, sometimes a wing of Cobras, other times it can be more powerful ships like actually happened here. I was actually very slow to start reacting, and that put me on the downside almost straight away. By the time I did decide to stay and fight, I was already on the losing end of this particular battle. With these types of distress calls, you actually need to get on the offensive very quickly, especially if you're fighting against a wing of vultures or even more powerful ships. You can see here I spent far too much time dithering around, and that was just about to come back and bite me in the backside. It probably would have made more sense if I left at this point rather than decided to engage. One of the problems here is that I've set my power management to disable the FSD drive when I open up when I deploy my weapons. So that meant as soon as I put my weapons away, the FSD actually took about 20 seconds to charge back up before it was usable. And that was one of the things that nearly caused me to lose the ship right here. And that was something I certainly didn't want to happen this early on in the rescue missions. Fortunately enough though, the FSD did start to kick in, even though there was some interference from the ships causing it to charge a little bit slowly. Eventually though, I did get away. A very quick trip then to the local station in order to get some repairs before I could resume investigating the distress calls around here. Sometimes it still surprises me the amount of locations you can get in a single system. Flying from planet to planet and moon to moon, I was treated to quite a few nice sights. Now none of that was any help to this next guy, yet another person who's gone out into space without enough fuel. This time though, I'd remembered to bring some fuel limpet drones with me, so I was able to refuel him, allowing him to get merrily on his way. As I've mentioned before, currently these sort of rescues don't actually offer any rewards. I'm not sure why that is. It seems a little bit odd. We could actually get some credit rewards, or we could be offered a secondary mission or something like that. But at any rate, at least he gave me his gratitude for helping him out. Yes, I know, he's just an NPC, but it is all about feedback from the game after all, isn't it? Something I'd like to see a lot more of. After a few of these distress calls then, I decided it was time to stop into one of the salvageable wreckages. This time it turned out to be one of the dense zones. I haven't seen one of these, absolutely chock full of debris, so yeah, like I say, it was the first time I'd seen one of these. So many debris in fact that it's all but impossible to navigate around it without bumping into a few of the debris. That said, the Anaconda back there seemed to be managing quite well, albeit perhaps moving very, very slowly. Now, there was some canisters here that I could have salvaged, even though it was illegal salvage, and there's a good chance that the ships here probably would have scanned me picking them up. But they were too fast in picking them up anyway, and they were soon running away with whatever it was they managed to pick up. If you do want to pick up some salvage here when you're in these zones, if there are some other rescue ships around, it's certainly going to be a race. Rather than just flying in a straight line, waiting for these signal sources and distress calls to actually spawn, I decided it was much better to fly from point to point. It keeps things a lot more interesting as there's a good variety of locations here. Right up close to the local star here then, I come across this guy who was buying technology components. Interesting to see him this close to the star. As you probably noticed just now, this is in the fuel scoop range of the sun itself, so probably a little bit hot for that big ship. The next distress call was where things really kicked up. Next to one of the large local gas giants, I come across another distress call and decided to jump into it. It was one of those ambushes, very similar to the one that almost completely annihilated me at the start of this video. This time I was a bit more prepared, but I still took a bit of damage before I actually really got into the swing of it. Now, keep in mind I hadn't been involved in combat for at least a couple of months, so I was a little bit rusty here, and it took me a while to actually get to grips with what I should be doing again. Another thing I realised at this moment was that I had lost my key bindings for the target selections, and that meant that every time I wanted to select a new target, I actually had to orientate toward it before I could do so. This ship was in a wing of 3, and as you can see it's a Vulture. I had no idea what the other 2 ships were. Normally I'd cycle through them just using the relevant button on the joystick, but as I mentioned, those had come unbound and I hadn't rebound them yet. So I decided to just concentrate fire on this ship. And there we got a very quick glimpse of what the other 2 ships in the ring actually were. Looked like a Sidewinder and an Eagle, and I didn't really notice that at the time. Now here I'm overheating for 2 reasons. Firstly, because I keep firing the beam laser, and secondly because I just deployed some chaff as well as a shield cell bank. Now this sort of heat build-up doesn't bother me too much in combat. Your ship can sustain this sort of heat level for a fair while, and although you can see me taking some hull damage, it's going to be quite a long time before that hull damage is enough to be of significant concern to me. Now I perhaps could have fit a heatsink to the ship, but I was already right over the very limit of the amount of modules that this ship was capable of supporting. So the best thing here was just to keep on attacking the Vulture, because once he was out the way I was pretty sure I'd be able to manage the other 2 targets. Now the hulls on Vultures can be quite thin, although that doesn't always seem to be the case with NPCs. It would seem they have different rules applied to them, as with the way chaff and other things seem to work with NPCs as well. They all seem to have different rules to what players actually have to abide by. At any rate, he was nearly destroyed here and on the way out. I often find Vultures to be more of a threat than Anacondas for some reason. Or maybe that's just down to their manoeuvrability. Now I was trying to keep on the guy's tail and I didn't do too good with that, but I did improve further through this particular event. We just saw the guy there that I'm trying to save. He's come under attack from all these ships. Now these NPCs have actually started attacking each other. Not quite sure what's going on there, but it's probably one of the things that really helped me out in defeating the Vulture a moment ago, because these guys were too busy on shooting each other that they actually forgot about me for a while. Now one thing that's really nice about these particular types of distress calls is that the pirates come in waves. Once you finish off the first wave, another one arrives. This wing here is a group of 5 Eagles or 5 smaller ships, so I decided to take them on, knowing that they wouldn't be too much of a challenge for me. That said, as the battle continues, I have dwindled in chaff and shield cell supplies, although I did make sure I brought plenty of that along with me. But these small little ships didn't stand up much chance against my Vulture, and I made very short work of them. Having the combat arrive in waves like this does give quite a different flavour to the game. It's quite a different variation to the distress calls and makes them well worth jumping into if you can find them. With this latest update, there's also been an increase in the amount of capital ships that actually are around. Some of the distress calls you jump into will be a capital ship in distress, and you can actually get involved in that fight as well. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find one of them, but here the final wave was an Anaconda and 2 Vultures. Now all 3 of them immediately started opening fire on the little ship that was in distress here. He must have some immense shields on him, because despite all 3 of these ships firing on him for quite a protracted time, he really didn't seem to be under too much threat. Anyway, I decided to take the Vultures out first and save the Anaconda for last. Now, I hope you don't mind, but I've skipped to the end of the fights with the Vulture because you've already seen me in enough combat here, and that's going to allow me to get straight to the fight with the Anaconda. Now, as you can see, the little Diamondback there is still being shot at by all of the might of the Anaconda, and he's still there, he's still surviving it, and he doesn't seem to be really too concerned, aside from keep shouting that he needs some help. But anyway, as soon as I shot at the Anaconda, it took the attention away from the Diamondback, and he immediately turned his focus to me. Now, going back to the talk of the capital ships inside these distress signals, I'd be interested to hear if any of you have actually encountered them. Those are often the Federation ships, or sometimes the Imperial ships that are under distress and actually need help. But when you drop into them, you'll find that they're under attack by quite a huge number of other smaller ships, and sometimes shortly thereafter another capital ship from the opposing faction will warp in, making it for quite a large and probably very impressive firefight. So Frontier are certainly ramping up the contents of what's in these signal sources and other aspects in space here. And by all accounts, the same is now happening in points of interest down on planets. I've seen a couple of people actually mentioning that they found some static Type 9 crashes and Anaconda crashes. These are persistent, and if you log out or return to the area, they're actually still there. And Frontier have also confirmed that they've added so-called barnacles into the games on the planets. These are the large green structures that you see in the Horizons launch trailer, and the opinion, the general consensus, is that they are quite possibly alien structures. So yet another sign that aliens might not be too far off with the game. At any rate, this fight with the Anaconda really wasn't all that hard. It was certainly a lot easier than the first fight in this distress call that I had with the Vulture you saw earlier on. With that done, I thought I'd head over to the little NPC guy, the Diamondback, to see what was going on with him, if there was anything further I could do. And as I turned around, I saw that an Anaconda rescue ship had arrived just in the nick of time to help me out with that rather large battle. And he hung around just long enough to take in what was going on, didn't really say anything or do anything with the Diamondback, and then ran off, launching into Supercruise again, leaving us both to it, and earning himself a well-deserved rest after all the hard work he'd done here. Now, the Diamondback continued to sit here. I don't know if he needed refueling, but unfortunately I'd misconfigured my power management, and when I deployed my weapons, my cargo hatch failed, venting all my fuel inputs into space, meaning that I was unable to do anything further with this Diamondback. But that said, the bounty vouchers from this distress call earned me nearly 600,000 credits, so quite a nice touch indeed, and certainly well worth dropping into. And that brings me to the end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time. You may remember during the beta for Horizons, my escapades down onto Achenar 3, where I attempted to land an Imperial cutter on a high 6G weld. Well, I thought I'd try that again, although this time I wanted to try it a little bit differently. This here is it's nearly a 10G planet. It's actually 9.77G.